Hey everybody, this is Drew and JC here on an episode of Horror Watchers. We have a cool guest that I am really looking forward to talking to, and we're going to introduce him after the intro. And that was the Horror Watchers intro there for
Yeah,
anybody that
um,
might not be familiar with it. We're going to
I wouldn't be.
kick it
I'm
over
not.
kick it over
You
to
didn't
our
even ask him how to pronounce his name correctly.
I know that's how I was trying to figure out how I could throw it to him. That's
I'm
the
gonna
thing.
make
I
you
always
guess.
double check, and when I don't, I mess it up. I mispronounced Frank Farrell's name when we had him on, and I'm still kicking myself over it. A month later.
Is it Van
But I,
Van Ryn?
No, it's Van Ryn.
I would have been right. I would have been
Why
right.
is there a Y there?
It's just the way you use the Y.
Yeah, if I'm ever in Scandinavia, we'll see.
It started out as Rijn.
That makes
That was
sense.
that was the original, like the old country way to spell my name, and then somebody thought a Y would be better.
I'm
It's
with
less
the
it's
Y.
less
I'm
room
with
on
the Y.
paper, right? It looks edgy. I'm not gonna lie.
But yeah,
It's
we
on.
are
Yeah,
here with Bill Van Ryn and
Rin, you
Rin.
messed.
Well, he brought in the I and the G, that's why the Y just works better. Because now I was on the wrong pronunciation. Bill Van Ryn, uh,
there you go.
go ahead and tell everybody what you do.
Oh well, when I'm not changing my name, I'm actually hosting a weekly live stream on Facebook and YouTube. I have a channel called Groovy Doom. I have a Facebook page called Groovy Doom, and I have a blog called Groovy Doom. Believe it or not, and I also publish a magazine called In Asylum. It's dedicated to fantastic films and the artwork that it used to accompany them in the newspaper when they would play your neighborhood. Um, I just grew up obsessed with the movie section of my newspaper. And for years and years and years, I never thought about that. And then one day, a friend of mine gave me a fanzine. And I knew what a fanzine was, but I had never actively pursued reading fanzines. I wasn't lucky enough to know anybody that published any. And a friend of mine gave me a fanzine called Snack Bar Confidential. And what that was a collection of artwork from old newspapers. It was just old ads for anything like furniture, clothing, movies, and any kind of product. And there was a different style that you used to see back, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And it just really captivated me. And I loved that there was a fanzine that put all this stuff together. I was like, this guy just went through the newspaper just like I do, because I had been collecting things online by that time for a couple of years, mostly horror ads, horror exploitation, porn, anything that was sensational looking that used to be in the newspaper. I would just go through and, clip everything that I could find in online archives. And then I started posting them on my Facebook page, Groovy Doom. And when I saw this fanzine, like I just knew that that was what I had to do with all these images, because I had like 10,000 images at that point. And I'd always wanted to share it with other people, and I wasn't sure how. And the fanzine was a perfect way to do it. In fact, I might have an actual issue of the fanzine right here. You can see it.
Very
This is our
cool.
latest issue, and this was published in April. So it's just a couple months old. We usually publish about 3 issues every year. And see, this give you an idea of the stuff that I have in the fanzine. It's old newspaper ads for horror movies. And you see, these ones are British ads for Nightmare on Elm Street for the series, and they look a little different than we're used to in America. You guys are probably familiar with the artwork that they use to promote most of these movies.
Yeah, that
And
one for 4 is jumping out at me too because that
mhm,
looks almost very Jallo-y to me.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, that's different.
so that's the kind of stuff that I publish in there, and I make collages out of them. So it's just like reading the newspaper back in the day. I wanted to recreate that experience of going to the newspaper to look for horror ads. So that's
Is
what I
it
do.
is it just the images, or do you have editorials and writers involved?
We have we have artists, authors, anybody who wants to contribute is welcome to contribute to it. I probably have about 25 contributors on and off. Not everybody's not in every issue. It's very loose. Just if you feel like doing it, you do it. And if you don't want to do it for another 6 months to a year, then that's fine. You can be in the next issue. And Sam Panico is one of them. And you guys might know Sam
I don't
Panico.
know who that is.
I
Yeah.
know his alter ego.
I know who he really is.
So yeah, Sam writes for the zine. He does artwork for the zine. And we actually get some really cool people to contribute to it too, like subjects to talk to. And that's something that always surprises me, because I never thought I could ever talk to these people and actually meet them and be able to find out what went on behind the scenes in making some of these old movies that I love. But now it's 2024 and everybody's online, and you can find most of these folks. If they're still with us, they're still out there, and they're usually pretty friendly if you approach them.
Yeah, I've been learning that myself with this podcast. Once we started to expand and get further into our other interests, I've kind of been shocked at the level of people that I've been able to reach out to. So you just kind of do the guerrilla method like me then, and just kind of hunt them down online and send them emails.
Sometimes it depends. There's different ways to approach people, and contributors find people too. It's not always just me. For the pieces that I want to write, like our cover star, one of them for this issue is Zooey Hall, who is an actor you may or may not know. He worked a lot in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And he was in a movie that is known to most folks as I Dismember Mama.
Okay, that
A
sounds
title,
vaguely familiar.
well, it's a very sensational title. And like many movies from the 70s, it was purchased by somebody else who rebranded it I Dismember Mama to make it a little more sensational, which displeased the people involved with the film, especially Zooey Hall, who didn't want to be in a movie called I Dismember Mama. The
Right.
original, you know, he was a working actor, so you ran the risk of being branded a certain way at that time. And you know, the original title was Poor Albert and Little Annie. So that's a little more, what could that be about? If there's more mystery there.
Yeah,
Right.
but I
You don't.
guess in '72 though, with your drive-in cinemas, I Dismember Mama is definitely something that's going to catch. At least it would have caught my attention in the advertisings in the But
Absolutely. It was a better title to sell it at the drive-in. It doesn't really give you an idea of the content of the film, which isn't quite as sleazy as it makes it sound. Um, it's a really disturbing psychological thriller. It's not a gore fest. It is pretty shocking. There's a couple brutal scenes in it, but not because necessarily of gore, just what's actually happening on the screen. So that's why, um, it was a different world in the 70s, and that's a lot of the focus of the films that we do are the 70s, also the 1980s. Our second guest was this guy, Gary Sherman, who one of my correspondents met at a convention and just agreed to do an interview right there on the spot.
That's Dead and Buried, right?
Yes. And a couple other things. Deathline is another movie he made, which was sold in the United States as raw meat. And he directed another movie called Vice Squad with Wings
Okay.
Hauser. Have you seen
Classic.
Vice Squad?
Yeah, there's a Scream Factory release of it.
Oh my God. I love that movie so much.
Wings Hauser is a guy that doesn't get enough credit, I think, just in general. A lot of the stuff that I've seen, like, so I'm obviously we're just a bit younger. So some of those 70s and 80s stuff, if it wasn't for, some of the boutique labels that are putting these things out, I
Yeah.
don't know if I would have even seen them with the interest that I have in this stuff as well. If, I think up until about 10 years ago, a lot of this stuff was like you couldn't give it away, and now it is almost kind of peak collector uh, memorabilia with some of the physical media companies like Vinegar Syndrome and Shout,
I like
all
to go.
those guys.
I like to go back to if remember the early stages of YouTube when it was like just rando people uploading videos. There always used to be these kind of movies that were on
Yeah.
YouTube for the longest time. That's how I saw them. Now you can't. Now they're not on YouTube anymore. But
Remember when you had to split it up into 10-minute videos?
Yeah.
yes. So you'd have part 1 through like 20 of a
And
movie
then
on there to watch.
17 would be missing, and you'd be like,
Yeah.
man, I can't find this
I
10
hated
minutes that
that.
are missing.
Like, is it there? Is it not there? Am I just not finding it? It drove me nuts.
But yeah, that's another nice little pocket of time.
I wanted to say, you know what the cover of your publication reminds me of, and this is totally unrelated, but it reminds me of some of the early Black Flag album covers.
Yeah,
And maybe that was what
had...
Black Flag was going for, but the kind of the panels with the photos and.
Well, it's a very tabloid style. In fact, I call the magazine a tabloid all the time because that's really what it is. It's just a very cheap or, cheap looking paste up job of a bunch of different sensational phrases and words. And, that kind of stuff turns me on.
Well, I like that you compared it to Black Flag there as well, because there's the element of DIY that is very much punk and punk rock that clearly exists right now. I mean, not just with your publication, but with a lot of the horror world in the community. The boutiques that I just had brought up, those are private companies that reached out to rights holders and started to put these films out and restoring them. I mean, down to bloggers or whatever. It's very DIY. So there's this definitely like deep rooted punk rock feel to what I think a lot of the horror community is doing right now. So, I mean, that's a good comparison.
Punk and fanzines went hand in hand.
Right.
And, because mainstream publications wouldn't touch that stuff, and Rolling Stone didn't want to write about the circle jerks, but somebody did, and they would just do it themselves, the fans, which is great.
Yeah, and down to kind of what we're doing with the podcast, where everybody's just kind of you're finding your niche and doing it, and so that comparison, I don't know, I thought that was worth exploring a little bit, but I'm curious.
Pre Henry Rollins, Black Flag. When Henry Rollins came on, it got too pretentious, but
Henry Rollins pretentious? I don't know what you mean.
I always wanted to check his spoken word stuff out, but I never got around to it.
Just listen to My War. That's all you need. You don't need to listen to anything else.
It's deep, man. It's really deep.
So deep.
But Rollins himself is, a bit of a horror icon too, and he got into
it's the wrong
pretty
turn.
decent horror films over the years. I don't know if it started with Feast or not, but to me, it's kind of like more of like that modern splatter type feel to it. And I remember Henry being, it's more of a cameo. I loved his role in that, where they kind of deconstructed that that heroic character and swiftly dismembered him pretty quickly.
I saw Henry Rollins. He did like a stand up kind of like comedy thing. Where it was just like, I don't know if it was supposed to be comedy. It was just him talking. Probably about 13 years ago, and it was the worst thing I've ever spent an hour and a half sitting through in my life. And the guy is like so. And I'm not. This isn't the Trash Henry Rollins podcast. I can do a separate episode for that. But just the lack of self awareness that he has, like with himself, and some of the. I don't want to say damage might be a bit too far, but he had some. How do I want to word this? Some maybe minor instances where he had damaged other bands while he was trying to climb over their bodies,
Sure.
to get to the top of punk rock popularity. It's unfortunate, but
It's always funny. But on that note, we'll just one more comment about Henry Rollins.
We'll move on from there. Yeah,
we'll get back on with Bill. But one thing that I always like stuck with me is when he was talking about Black Flag touring without him, and he said like the last show that he recognizes as a Black Flag show, and he like it's the last show that he did with them. Like he like definitely has always acted like the band didn't exist before they brought him in. He's like, this is a pretty successful band before Henry Rollins.
Absolutely. He's the misfits of the actual punk rock world, right?
I was wondering when we were going to get to Glenn Danzig.
I'm not going to let anybody talk shit on Glenn Danzig.
I don't talk about people that are shorter than my dogs. So
I have a whole Misfits half sleeve.
Oh, it was kind of fading out there when you held your arm up. Your background was taking it over.
I can verify that he does.
I see it now. Yeah.
And then like the other side of it, like right here, this is a cover up. This is a tattoo I did with an ex of mine that my current wife wasn't happy to look at all the time. So I was like, let's do a koi fish with scales that are Misfits logos. But I love the Misfits. But the Misfits, of course, with Glenn, he has that kind of same love for that old school horror and like kind of drive-in stuff as well. And I don't know if that's one of the reasons why I stuck with that band the way that I did. But
there weren't many bands that had that connection of a horror imagery. The only other one that I can think of off the top of my head is the Cramps. Yep. Who I love the Cramps so much, but not because they had zombies and stuff on the cover of their records, because I really do dig their music. But they did it. The Misfits. You saw a lot of that stuff in the record store, and I don't know why I didn't buy that shit back in the day when it was cheap and nobody wanted it, and now you can sell it. Like Misfits singles, the early ones, they sell for like $10,000 now. If you have one of the original pressings for Misfits. Wow. I think their first 3 7-inch singles are the most expensive records on Discogs.
Even just their like re-released CDs and stuff are not obviously that high, but like insanely high. Like it's like a couple $100 if you want to get Earth AD. Which again, you're right. I don't own a single CD. I have 2 Kiss CDs right now. Those are the only 2 CDs that I own, because even that part of physical media has kind of fallen into the collector's market, where the good stuff is you got to pay ridiculous amounts. I'm willing to I'm a guy that I'll drop. I'm like a week away from spending $70 for the Opera 4K. I will.
Oh yeah.
I will spend money on my physical media, but it's kind of you got to pick and choose where you're doing it at this point.
I heard you're going to the Monsterama this year.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to make it. I wasn't able to go last time. It's almost like every other one I find myself able to go to. But that second night in particular looks, pretty much can't miss. I can't wait to go.
I've wanted to see opera on a big screen ever since I first saw opera, and I have never gotten the chance. So here it is. It's gonna happen.
Yeah, same. Cemetery Man for me as well. That's the one that jumps out the most for me for that night too. As I remember renting it a whole bunch of times when I was younger, and we would always go to like my uncle's house, and we would just everybody would go to like Blockbuster, pick a movie. He didn't live near any of the cool mom and pops that we had where I lived, and I would always just annoy him because he hated it. I'd grab Cemetery Man, so we would watch Cemetery Man, just an obscene amount when it was the VHS rental. So I know that I actually don't have the 4K of that yet either. It came out over the course of the year when I was being a little more responsible with my finances, but I'm right back to the addiction of purchasing movies, and it's just consuming me. So I can't wait to pick that up. But
Are you
yeah,
addicted too, John, to purchasing movies?
No. I have ways of watching movies, but I don't normally purchase physical copies of them. I am I guess we call it a media hoarder, though, in the sense that I have electronic versions of pictures, music, videos, movies, pro wrestling events, UFC events, you know, I have massive amounts of like the network attached storage, the big hard drives, and then I burn them to DVD. I have like backups of media, and even like books. Like I collect, I guess call it collecting or hoarding. PDF files, the EPUBs of random books. I have things that go back to like books that are written in Latin that I can't read. That like I feel like somebody's got to hoard this stuff, right? Because things disappear, they get put up on the internet, they disappear. So I have them. Just come to me. I got them. What are you looking for?
it's
I
that same.
remember that.
Yeah, it's the same mental illness. I think that will drive me to have 10 copies of the same movie.
I've started collecting records, so that's going to lead me down a hole. I collect like retro video games and like old tech. So I have all kinds of like old Apple computers, IBMs, every gaming system you can think of. We used to joke that my house. So I live in Cleveland. My house in Cleveland was the retro gaming museum of Ohio, is what everybody calls it. So
I'm not much of a gamer. Like I was just talking about Sam about video games the other night. Like after the show was over, we were still BSing, and we started talking about ColecoVision. And I don't know if you have a ColecoVision or
I have two.
I have. I mean, I had it years ago when it was new. My parents got me an Atari 2600, and then when ColecoVision came out, I managed to convince them to get one of that, and that was it. Like I could never have another gaming system, and I knew better than to ever ask for another one. But they had that adapter with ColecoVision where you could play Atari games on it, and I still have my old set. It was getting kind of wonky, and then one day I was at the junk store and I found a brand new mint condition ColecoVision for $8.
Wow.
I was like, holy shit. And the reason it was still sitting there was because it didn't have the adapter with it. So you couldn't use it unless you found that adapter or ordered it special. But I had an adapter, and I didn't need one. So I snatched that baby up. I still play that stuff too, like all those old ColecoVision games.
There are still developers creating like indie games for the ColecoVision. Now like there's a good solid like 6 or 7 I can think of off the top of my head. I do another podcast. It's a tech podcast, and we talk to those developers and stuff, and it's got a strong community still to this day.
I don't know if I've ever had one.
It's a neat little system. I think it was overlooked just because of the timing of it when it came out.
ColecoVision?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 82.
Yeah, it was
pretty successful.
it was successful, but I mean, like for like people my age and collectors and stuff, like people look at like the Intellivision 2, they look at the Ataris, they look
Uh-huh.
at the the IBM computer systems and that, and the ColecoVision has like that core. It's like the underground fan group of people, but there's some toxicity in the community as well, which I won't get into. But it exists. I can guarantee it.
Every community has one of them.
But it's a great system. I think I think the music chip that they used in there, I can't think of it right now off the top of my head, was great for the time when it came out in '82. And just all around it was a good system, and came right off the heels of like the video game market starting to crash and stuff like that. So
Yeah, they were actually that was sort of an upgrade from an Atari 2600. The graphics on ColecoVision were a lot more accurate to the arcade games.
yeah,
The play was similar, but the Achilles heel of ColecoVision is it had a really shitty controller. And not only did it have a shitty controller, the controller broke all the time. Like just from using it, you would wear it out very easily. Like within a couple of years, they're dead. So that's why I was so glad to find that new system, because it had like pristine, untouched controllers. And I was like, wow, it's like starting over. But overall, like that was a major upgrade from the 2600. And the only thing that sunk ColecoVision is they made a really bad business decision, and they built this computer called Atom. And Atom,
I have one.
yeah, it was just awful. And because I wanted one of those so bad, I wanted Atom so bad when I was hearing that it was coming out, because I loved ColecoVision. I'm like, Mom, it's a home computer and I can play ColecoVision on it. And then it came out and everyone was like, no, it sucks. And I was like, oh, forget it. I don't want one.
The dumbest thing about it is that they routed the power supply through the printer.
Really?
So to use the system, you have to plug in the printer. And if you buy one now, most of the printers are broken. You're not going to normally find one with a working printer. But there are two people that make power supplies that you can plug in separately without the printer.
There you go.
I mean, if you could pick up an Atom, I think it's a great system, and it had some of that extra RAM and stuff. So like I think there was only 26 games that were made specifically for the Atom. So like, don't go out of your way to get one if you don't really want it. But I just think the original ColecoVision looks super cool. Like at the time, you had the Atari, it had like the wood grain, on the front, but then the ColecoVision comes out and it's just this dark black with like the ColecoVision logo in silver, with the colors and ColecoVision.
Yeah.
And it looked real futuristic at the time.
It was very Blade Runner.
It was. And actually, as far as controllers go, you can buy like square controllers that have the number pad in the middle, and it works like like a normal controller, but it has like a number pad on it. So yeah.
It almost, looking at pictures, it almost looks like what car phones would eventually look like.
A little bit, yeah.
With just
it's a
cord and
the controller.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can pull one up.
I mean, it's a cool little system. If you're into retro gaming, I think you can get them on eBay for about $70 or $80. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
And it really is. It is what cellular phones used to look like when they first came out.
And then it had the slip overs too, which other systems used as well. But you'd just put the little slip over top of the numbers, so you could have like certain things. And each game came with them.
Mousetrap had one.
Yeah. Qbert is my go-to. Always.
I love Qbert.
Man, I got Qbert on my phone. Don't even get me going on Qbert.
I have some of the Qbert sounds for notifications on my phone. That awesome. In Time Pilot. It's really strange that we ended up talking about this.
I met Warren Davis, who programmed Qbert a couple years ago, and I didn't even know he was going to be at this retro event. And I saw him. I was like, "Oh man, that's Warren Davis!" And I ran around this thing looking for a copy of Qbert for him to sign. And I bought like an Atari 5200 version of Qbert, like this big. The 5200 was that weird one that was in between where like nobody wanted it. It was giant and it was ridiculous. And just so he could sign it. So I just have this copy of Qbert for the 5200 with his signature sitting in my basement up on a shelf.
That's cool though, because JC usually doesn't get to talk when we have episodes like this. So I'm glad that he like we had Frank Farrell on, and I was like, dude, you need to watch these movies. You need to be prepared. You need to watch Street Trash. You need to watch Spookies. Like I want like dissertations about them. You be ready to go. And he did it. And then Frank came on, and I was like, whoa, I'm talking to an idol of mine, and JC doesn't even need to be here. Like, I think he got 2 sentences in like that whole show.
So that's why I picked on JC. He looked a little lonely.
It happens from time to time. It's okay.
But yeah, I still feel bad about that because he definitely put the work in to be prepared, and then I just fanboyed for an hour and 15 minutes.
Then I bought the 4K version of Street Trash.
I haven't even seen a fixed up version of Street Trash. I think I've only seen the VHS rip.
Man, the one on Tubi is so good.
Yeah, I can verify that. I don't know how they have such a good copy. I think it's the exact restoration that Synapse did. But I also think, I mean, it was announced a while ago that Synapse was going to do a 4K, and they just never got around to it yet. And I know I can't remember his name. He was a little ill and had some health issues that slowed some stuff down. But he's going to be on the show. So October, I think. I can't remember exactly, but I'm excited to talk to him as well. But one thing I wanted to ask you about the fanzine was, how did you kind of have that idea come to fruition? Like, what's the process of putting a magazine out in 2024? I know that you have an Etsy site where you sell them, but as far as printing and from conception to release, what's the process?
Well, I print and sell the magazines myself. I don't have somebody create the physical product. From conception, it started out, I had this cheap knockoff Photoshop program, Canon ArcSoft, and it came with like a flatbed scanner I bought in the late 90s. And I just always had it on my computer. And for a piece of software, eventually developers got wise to this and they started making their free programs dumber and smaller. And they didn't do as many cool things. But ArcSoft really does a lot of cool things. It's very similar to Photoshop. So I just started fiddling around with that. Like I used to edit photos with it. And then I started doing like photo collages that I would turn into posters. And I thought, you know what? I could do a magazine like this. And it was after I saw Snack Bar Confidential, the one I told you about at the beginning. An artist named Lance Laurie puts that out. He's, I think, in the Philly area. But he's a friend of a friend. And, our mutual friend gave me his fanzine. And I looked at it and I was like, I could do this. I know I could do something like this. So I just tried it and it worked. I just went through each double page layout in the magazine. That's a page folded in half, you would end up with 2 pages. So I just started making those, and it's really complicated to put it together. I won't bore your guests by explaining it, but to actually make sure that when you order this at the printer, they give you back an actual readable copy of the magazine. It's a little complicated with you have to do a physical mock-up of it. I found I'll just like do a blank a stack of folded blank paper, and then I'll write each page on there and make sure it lays out properly. And then you send it to the printer. I have a good working relationship with a printer. I use copies at Carson. They're located on the south side of Pittsburgh, and they do fantastic work there. And when I first started publishing Drive In Asylum, I used to take it to like a brand store, like a national chain. And I'm not going to say who, but it was really expensive to get it done there. And I didn't understand that that was expensive. And I just paid them for like the first 3 or 4 issues of DIA. I was losing money basically by selling, because I sell it for $5. And that's, more or less what it cost me to produce the magazine. But when I was doing it at the old place, I paid more like $6 or $7 an issue and still sold them for $5. But Copies at Carson is great. I send them a PDF file of my new issue, and by the end of the week, I've got a box of them to go pick up at the printer. I have a good relationship. They know what I want. They know how to do it, and that's how I make it happen. And I just go pick up the issues at the printer. I put it on sale in the Etsy shop, and I take all the orders. I pack all the orders. I ship them out myself. The only other people that are involved in it, and which just reminds me, I have to get back to them. I have 2 wholesalers that actually, stock the magazine in their store. One is Forbidden Planet in New York City, and they're like the premier comic store in New York, if you've never heard of them. And the other is in the UK. They're called Strange Vice UK, and they sell it overseas. And these are just relationships that I just happened into. Forbidden Planet contacted me and said, would it be okay if we stocked your magazine in our store? And I was like, sure.
Yeah, that's really cool. What initiated the relationship with the store overseas? I find that really interesting, considering the content that you talk about versus like the laws that they had over there, and
Yeah.
the classification of video nasties, and just like Europe, like UK's um almost the only time they've ever been kind of Puritan, really, as far as media goes, has always been censoring horror films. Meanwhile, they have TV shows where people date each other based on looking at each other naked. It's just such a weird concept to me that they've been so anti gore and sleaze in horror, but in all of the other aspects of their media, it's very much lax in that.
Well, I think that's the opinion of many countries overseas. They can't relate to the American experience of violence. The way America relates to violence is very different. And we're not offended by depictions of it in entertainment. And, they've been taught to never express those kinds of things, even though obviously violence like that does happen everywhere in the world. So I think, maybe in America, we're being a little more honest about these base human instincts that pop up. But, I don't know. I've never, really cared much about the psychological aspect of violence. But yeah, the censors were really offended by a lot of that stuff. They just couldn't deal with it. And I think in the UK, it's kind of like the forbidden fruit, because these are movies that did not they were obsessed with them back then, but they were all just edited versions of the movie and some of them didn't come out at all. So there's still meat on the bone over there. Like in America, like we've already processed all of this, and now it's nostalgia. Whereas I think in the UK, it's less nostalgic in the UK. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I like up until very recently, these laws were still in place. I think someone
Mhm.
had told me that you still would have trouble finding an unedited version of The Evil Dead, of all things. And that's like a pretty modern widely released studio kind of thing in America. And to hear that that was something that was classified over there as something that needed censored and that you couldn't buy it, like, man, you just literally a part where you can see the eye is on a stick. Like, why are we censoring that? That blows my mind.
It's insane. That movie is so absurd. Like, I don't know how you could take the violence in Evil Dead seriously. It's not even like a slasher film, like where they have a graphic throat slashing or something. This is like, sawing people's body parts off and like trees raping people. And how could you? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah, and I was, as far as the tree rape goes, I was concerned for the remake that I honestly ended up really enjoying. I think that the remake was fantastic. But when they had included that, I was like, I'm blown away that in, like, it was like 2013 that we're still actually able to have that level of artistic integrity still in a wide studio release of all things. Uh, so, but yeah, so we got that in 2013 remade and reimagined, and there it is. And at that point, you still couldn't get the original on a DVD copy over there. So yeah, I think that's really cool that your magazine is in a store over there. That's super neat, actually.
Well, one of the guys who really pioneered this examination of American independent horror in particular, that's, mainly what we do at Drive-In Asylum. Well, I mean, we'll talk to anybody. Let's just say that. Most of the people that we talk to are in more obscure things. We have had people like Joe Bob Briggs was in our magazine. Um, oh God, like just some pretty awesome people, like George Stover, who's an actor from Maryland who was in a lot of films made by Don Dohler, and he was in a couple of John Waters movies too. He was in our magazine. Dusty Nelson, the director of effects. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It was like 1980 era.
Is that the Tom Savini effects, or am I thinking of
Yes,
the wrong one? Okay.
yes, that movie. Tom Savini is in it. Joe Pilato has the lead, Sergeant Rhodes from Day of the Dead. But that was made by Romero's associates, around in 1980. He was in the magazine. In fact, you guys will have the scoop on this. In one of the upcoming issues, we've got an interview with John Conway, who is, a director and producer. I know him best as the director of the Boogans, if you've ever seen the Boogans from
Yeah.
1981. And we've also got an interview with Joe Dante. And, Joe Dante needs no introduction.
Right. Yeah, no, that's awesome. How did you end up getting into contact with him of all people?
That was another correspondent, a guy named Matt Hankey, who operates out of Oklahoma. He's an independent filmmaker, just like an amateur filmmaker doing stuff just like we're doing. And, I've known him for a couple of years. He got in touch with Joe. He also got Michael Berryman from The Hills Have Eyes and many other movies. He was in the magazine. David Hess, who played Krug in Last House on the Left. He passed away in, I think, 2013 is when David Hess passed. But this was an unpublished interview that had been done with him, a couple years before his death. So that was pretty awesome. These are all things that people they have them and they know that they want to get them out there. And this is a nice, I've created a platform really for people to express themselves, and me as well. It's an artistic expression from me. The entire thing is designed by me, like, all of the imagery, a lot of it's collage, but some of it is graphic art that I've created myself, just that has a retro look to it that I like the frames around people's faces and, the titles and the logos. I create a lot of that stuff myself, so it is artistic expression as well. But most of all, it's what you guys alluded to. You said you touched right on this, and I didn't talk about it then. I'm going to talk about it now. You were like, this stuff is a little bit, we're a little younger than you, and we don't know a lot of this stuff from the 70s. And then you said it about the stuff you do too. It's like it's we're all just sort of like talking about this stuff. We're keeping it alive and keeping the appreciation of it alive. And it's what you do, and it's what I do too. So it's all very similar. And that's what's
Yeah,
most important.
yeah, level of film historian or art historian. I We all kind of fall into that, and sometimes a friend of mine will convince himself like it's so funny when we talk about our physical media collections. It's something every single moment of our life we're just constantly texting or sending like video chats like oh, I picked this up, or I'm at this store. And I was in Half Price Books the other day, and I was like literally videoing the entire selection for him. And 2 days later, he's at a different location, and he's doing the same thing for me. And he constantly refers to his collection as the library. Like he is, in his mind, he's curated this library of film that he's not sure when, but someday it will be the go-to for people to check the physical media out. And if it wasn't for his library, these films could be lost forever, just like JC had talked about hoarding earlier with the files and kind of being this protector of this knowledge. So yeah, I think that's definitely a level of appreciation that every one of us kind of falls into preserving this. Not every genre has that. Like I don't think 20, 30 years from now people are going to have that same level of regard for Captain America, the Winter Soldier. I just I'm not sure what it is about the genre or what it is about the people that love the genre, but there's just a dedication that I don't think really exists everywhere else. I mean, at least as far as I've seen. I could be wrong.
Yeah, and we can't really know what people are going to think about all of this stuff in 20 years. Yeah, it might not even be important anymore. So who knows? But I think the important thing is that we're doing it. We're also doing it because we have to. That's how I feel about it. Like I have to get a lot of these images in a place where people can look at them and appreciate them, because I feel that the art of promoting movies in particular has already changed so much. Like there's no reason really to have an elaborate movie section in a newspaper anymore, because nobody looks in the newspaper anymore. Like they're not,
Right.
it's not a big deal. It's not necessary anymore. So that has changed so much, and that necessitates this kind of curation of images, because I feel that there's something very aesthetically pleasing about all of that stuff. I like it. It makes me feel good.
Yeah, same. It definitely, like looking at these old movie posters gives you a different sense of the art versus seeing a header on Netflix, that changes every 10 seconds and it doesn't have much effort put into it at all versus something that somebody had taken the time to create and, to specifically drew in some cases, for these films. And now it's just here's a digital picture with a digital font that took 2 seconds to slap on to a streaming service. But one thing I have noticed is, especially with Tubi, we're at least getting a lot of the newly commissioned art that the boutiques are doing.
I noticed
Um,
that too.
yeah, so you'll see a lot of Severin or Arrow and sometimes Vinegar Syndrome commissioned art now that's being put on the streaming releases, which that's a step in the right direction. But yeah, I'm curious, do you have a specific artist that that might actually still be around who created this stuff that you have maybe like a kind of like a bucket list, or someone that you'd like to feature in the magazine or have it on an episode of the Saturday show to chat about the artwork that they created? Or is it just kind of like an all-encompassing art format that gets you?
Yeah, it's more the format. I don't know a lot of the actual artists who designed, because a lot of it came from the actual poster that was created for the property, whatever it is. And there was a press book that they would send out, but somehow there was some kind of something happened to it when it translated from what they send you in a press book, which is a nice clean image, to what you actually saw in the newspaper. It became like the contrast went way up, and it sort of like took it to this hyper level sometimes of seeing like in all like the dot, you could see all the little dots in the image because it was grainy. And that's part of it for me. So it's not so much about the actual artists that created the images, although they are talented, fantastic designers and artists, but it's more like the experience that I'm after.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. We're working on a movie concept right now, and I've been doing the artwork kind of in a similar vein. And so I have that same kind of appreciation for that look, that, like that newspaper grindhouse kind of. I almost hate to say grindhouse because that's such an overused, convoluted
Yeah.
term at this point, but a lot of people will only know of it as like grindhouse. But yeah, that just drive-in artwork that's it's faded and blurry in some cases. That's one of my favorite aspects of the show that you guys do on Saturday. Is I like the little extra touches where when you will bring up the images of the artwork when you're talking about the films before you jump into them. And then obviously I'm a fan of Sam doing the weekly drink that he like comes up with a featured drink for the movie that you guys are watching as well. I think those are two really unique and fun aspects of your show that similar
Thanks.
shows might they're not doing. Like it's funny because what you guys are doing, I am a fan of and I respect it a lot. And I'm like, man, that's just a good idea. Sometimes I'm jealous. I'm like, man, I wish I came up with that. Like
Well,
the
anybody could do it, you know. It's not like we're going to be pissed if people start making shows that look like ours, because ours is all copied off of old, graphic designs that used to be in ads. Like those TV borders that I create are all from
yeah,
old retro ads for TVs. So, it's all inspiration. So,
your layout with the TVs is such a fantastic touch. I commented a couple of times, like, where are you guys getting this? So that's one that you had made yourself.
oh yeah, I make all of them. I make
And
all of those overlays. And my concept of our show is that it's a TV show, even though it's not. I was like, well, what if this was a TV show? Like, if people were watching us, because you used to see all kind of strange things on UHF channels, cable, local access cable channels. At later, those came later, at least for our area. But there was a certain look to those old horror host shows and the stuff that you would see in the 80s. So I try and emulate that. I create bumpers like as if we're going to go to a commercial or something. And sometimes we do. I've played Monsterama commercials on the show, and I make a commercial for In Asylum all the time. I force all of our viewers to look at stuff like that. But I make it look like a TV show, and because I want it to look like something you'd see on late night TV,
yeah,
because
no,
that's what I want to see.
I love it. I have that same respect for that. I've been trying to figure out how I can incorporate a horror host show on top of everything else that we're doing, and I just don't have like enough room here to do it. I've been trying to build a little studio in like the back corner of the house for this for about 6 months, but my desk that I ordered for it has just been sitting in a box ever since. Like I just haven't even gotten around to building the desk, let alone setting the like a studio up. But we also have we have some commercials that I've done just to kind of almost have that same format. I've had advertisements for mainly our stuff, but we did a documentary. So we have a trailer in here for our documentary, or if I make some new t-shirts, I'll make like a 15-second commercial that we've, just from time to time on special occasions. We did a game show, a live game show on our channel, and we presented that 100% like a TV show where we had 3 different ad breaks, and we did, two. I think one trailer was our documentary, and then the other was merchandise. But I even set it up so that before somebody answered the question, I was like, "But before you answer it, we're gonna head for a break,"
Here's
and
an ad.
like, so I totally get that same desire to have the show kind of formatted like that. That's another one of the things that we connect with is those old, that old horror host thing. And I think
Oh, yeah.
it's Joe Bob does a great job of keeping that alive. And obviously Svenguli's still,
Yep.
rocking it, but there's like an entire generation that's already forgotten that. Elvira
Yeah.
there is a game at Chuck E. Cheese that it's like a roller coaster thing where you get on it, and my kids love it. You just get on it, and it's a roller coaster simulator, and one of them is an Elvira, and I noticed it, and so I'll jump on this roller coaster simulator with them, and they always know to put the Elvira one on because that's the one I like doing. But it just it's like blows my mind. It's 2024. Here are these kids who have no idea who Elvira is. I had to explain it to them, and my 4-year-old now knows who Elvira is because of Chuck E. Cheese. So like, there's this whole generation that doesn't even know what that stuff is, and so anytime like we get into that preservation and historian conversation again, but that's one of the genres that really hits home for me.
I know in the Pittsburgh area they still play Chili Billy, Bill Cardillo. They still play him. Cleveland, we had Goulardi. They still play Goulardi. I'm sure every city probably had, that black and white horror host playing the B movies at like 1:00 in the morning.
Ghost Host. That was
Ghost
mine.
Host, yeah.
Do you guys know who Ghost Host was?
I don't.
He was out of Baltimore, actually, but we got him in Pittsburgh through Channel 22, WPTT. Like they went on the air in 79. And right around that time, my grandfather gave me this little 9-inch black and white TV, which it was unheard of at that time. Kids just didn't have TVs in their bedroom. And I was like, oh my God, I can have a TV in my bedroom now. And every Saturday night I was tuned into Ghost Host. So they put like a wire hanger in the antenna to pick up the channel. Like that's something people totally can't relate to now. But like that was your connection to media. However you could do it, you did it. And whatever they were showing, it wasn't that bad because that's what you had to watch tonight. So Ghost Host brought a lot of those old movies to me. Like he played different movies, whether he was in the Baltimore or the Pittsburgh area. It was like sent out for syndication and they were different. But we got a lot of science fiction movies for some reason, like Mothra and Godzilla movies. A lot of the horror stuff was that old public domain stuff, like The Devil Bat, and some movies that they didn't have to pay anyone to show on TV. But that was what I got, and he had a great spooky intro. He narrated it from like a room in this house it was supposed to be rain, but it looked like snow falling on the house when they zoomed in on it. And this weirdly inappropriate music that sounded like an adventure movie would come on, and then it would fade away, and there was this eerie like crickets chirping and like some kind of like weird spooky storm sound effects, and you'd zoom into his window and there he was like in darkness, and you could see portions of his face lit up in the dark, but like most of his face was obscured, and he was like he was at these like a mad scientist laboratory, and he was mixing potions and drinking them. and he would narrate in this spooky voice. You never saw his mouth. And eventually I started to figure it out. I'm like, oh, it's just the same footage every week, and they changed the voiceover. So that's why they filmed him and you couldn't see his mouth moving. I loved Ghost Host. He had a graveyard on the side of his house where, like, in the middle of the movie, he'd come out and he'd narrate from the graveyard. He'd walk around the graveyard and tell you what movies he was going to be shown in the next couple of weeks.
I'm looking it up right
now. That's
now.
awesome. Yeah.
That's going to be my binge watch for like the next week.
I wonder if that was like permitted, or was that a set, or is that just an actual graveyard next to his house? Because I've had cops throw me out of a graveyard.
Oh no, no, it was all a set. I mean, you could clearly see that it looked like a High School Musical, that kind of a
set. There's apparently a Buckethead song called Ghost Host, if anyone was interested.
One of those things was creepy though. When he was walking through that graveyard, there were bodies there, like dead people were laying there. It was just whoever was in the studio, they made them go lay down. And there was one scene where he was narrating what movie he was going to show next week, and he took a ring off of the dead body and put it on his own hand and walked away.
Oh man, it looks like snow so bad. That's not rain, that's snow.
I didn't lie.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna have to probably join you, JC, and start watching some of this stuff. You send me.
We need to do a show just based off like from cities that we've never. Like I said, like I'm sure every city had some kind of host like this. We should do a show about that.
We did an issue of the magazine, a horror host issue of Drive-In Asylum, and we got a lot of great people that were involved in that. Other people just wrote about their local horror hosts that they were into. That's how I met Count Gregory, and he was out of Oklahoma as well. And he was a horror host beginning back in the 1950s, I think. He's still alive and he's still Count Gregory. Like, he still makes appearances at conventions as Count Gregory. He's in his 90s.
Oh wow, yeah, that's awesome. As far as that goes, your past issues, I noticed I was on the Etsy site earlier today, and there's a couple of issues that you have, like there's just one left. So I'm curious, for anybody listening, like, once that sells out, is that like done for good, or is there a possibility that somebody might be able to backlog with you?
No, I keep them all in stock myself. They run low in the Etsy shop, and I just go and change it whenever I get new issues printed. As long as there's still an interest in it, I'm going to keep selling it, and eventually, old issues, like I don't restock issues 1 through 7 anymore. The only place you can get those are at Forbidden Planet in New York. They still do it, but I don't want to do it in the Etsy shop anymore because it was just too many issues to be juggling. I just reorder from the printer, like whenever people are buying them, whenever they start selling out, I just do another order and restock. So don't worry, that'll still be in print.
Okay, cool. Well, we hit that hour mark. We usually like to end it, and
I just saw the graveyard too. Perfect timing.
at an hour there. That way, I don't know if you like us. Maybe I'd rather get another episode with someone than eventually start to bore them to death with my silliness. But before we let you go, I want to thank you for your time. It was definitely a fun chat. And we always kind of leave the floor to the guests to promote anything they have to promote, all of your links, that kind of stuff.
Go check out my YouTube page, Groovy Doom. That's the number one thing right now, because there's still a new issue of Drive-In Asylum that's in production. It's special. It's the 1980 yearbook, and we've done 1979, we've done 1981. Now we're going back in the middle and doing 1980 because that just made more sense. And then after that is going to be the issue with John Conway and Joe Dante. Look for both of these issues. Hopefully I'll have them out by the end of the year. I also do a Halloween fanzine called Haunt. I'm not sure if you've ever seen Haunt, but it's no articles. It's just wall to wall vintage Halloween newsprint ads for Halloween parties, haunted houses in the area. It's all like from the 1920s all the way up until the 90s of Halloween, and that goes on sale in September. But go to the YouTube page, follow Groovy Doom on there. The last episode of the In Asylum double feature that we did was really cool. We had an actress, her name's Jennifer Ashley, and she was our guest on the program. And Jennifer was in so many awesome movies, most of them prior to your age. I don't know if you'd be into them. They were actually like, you know, there was like a movie called The Pom Pom Girls, which was one of our movies last weekend. And it was sort of like a drive-in riff on American Graffiti, which was, you know, kind of a drive-in movie in and of itself, but it became known as like a very successful film and popular. And The Pom Pom Girls was a much lower budget version of that, and it's phenomenal. We watched it. It's just like, you know, kids having fights and getting stoned their senior year in high school. And she came on the program and she talked to us. She was awesome. Go check it out. That's the last episode on the Groovy Doom YouTube page.
All right, yeah, for sure. Check it out. It's definitely become something of a Saturday habit for me to jump on when I can, and I try to stay awake for all of it. But a lot of times I find myself dozing off because the kids always wake me up super early in the morning, so I have to revisit it later on. But it's definitely super cool. You co-host that with Sam Panico, who is a former guest on this show, so our listeners are aware of Sam as well. And,
former as in no longer welcome.
Only Shirley Doe is welcome, and he must be in full gimmick and have the X painted on his forehead in his next appearance. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on, and I hope everybody checks your stuff out. I think everything that you're doing is super cool. I'm definitely like the target audience, and so I'm glad that our paths have crossed and we've been able to chat.
Yeah, right on. Anything you want to know about getting your magazine started, I can help you.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'll definitely hit you up for some information if I ever decide to actually pull the trigger on that. I'm not quite sure if we're gonna do that just yet, but yeah, it's definitely super. I think in 2024 it's also unique to kind of have that physical print too. But we're all kind of I think starved for tangible things at this point, and maybe this generation that only knows streaming and digital might start to yearn for the tangible. I don't know, not to get philosophical while we're playing the outro, but I think everything about it's just awesome. So again, thank you for coming on, and we'll go ahead and we'll hit the outro here when I find it. And you have no obligation to stay on. If you choose to, though, I'm sure I'll hang out in the green room for a couple minutes at least.
All right, cool. I'll stay on.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The preceding program has been brought to you by the Watchers Podcast Network. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends to help grow our network. Check us out on all social media platforms, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, thanks for your support.